Hi, thanks for tuning in today to another Front Porch Conversation. We're here on a beautiful, it's now technically fall day, on the front porch at the Copeland Community Center. And I had the pleasure of having as our guest today, Liz Reynolds. Thank you, Liz, so much for being with us.
I'm glad to be here.
We have all the background noises of nature, don't we? I just heard a rooster crow, and so it's an average, nice front porch day. Liz, would you tell us a little bit about where you grew up? And
Yes, I was born in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and lived in West Lebanon with my family until I was about 10 years old. And from there we moved over into Vermont, not too many miles away, in Sharon, Vermont. And I grew up there until I went off to college.
Do you have siblings?
I had 2 brothers and a sister.
And what kind of...
I was the youngest.
Oh, so what kind of adventures did you get in with them growing up?
Mostly with the one that's nearest in age, 4 years older than me. We did a lot of things together. The others were older. My sister went off to college when I was pretty young. My older brother went off to agricultural school in Vermont. So I grew up with my brother Roy, and yeah, he was a pest.
Would he say the same of you?
Pardon me?
Would he say the same about you?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure he would.
A mutual admiration.
We still tease each other.
That's great. Did you grow up in a rural area?
West Lebanon was a small town on the Connecticut River, and had a lot of friends there, and we at that time we would spend all of our time outdoors until dark. We had to be home when the street lights came on. Mm-hmm. And then when we moved to the farm, I had the woods and the farmland and animals, and I really fell in love with nature during that time.
And we'll talk more about that during our conversation today, because that, I think, is a big part of your life at this point. And you went to college. Where did you attend college?
I went to the University of Vermont, and I majored in French and Spanish, and I was planning to be a teacher. And then after moved to New York State briefly, and found out that you had to have a master's degree to get a teaching job there. Uh-huh. And so not too long after that, I moved to Florida and went to the University of Florida in Gainesville and got a master's degree there, but I had started teaching before that.
And how's your French and Spanish these days?
Not too good, because I did brush up on my Spanish when I traveled to Baja, Mexico a few years ago, but yeah, I can still read it, but I have some hearing loss, and it's just I have trouble understanding people speaking the language because of that, and because I haven't used it.
That is something you really have to use, or you do lose it. I took only high school French, and today I can look at a menu in French and decide if I'm getting chicken or fish, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's me. I can read it pretty good.
And you finished your master's at the University of Florida. Mm-hmm. And where did you go from there?
Well, I was teaching I started out at elementary school in Ocala, and later I transferred to the middle school, where I finished my career, taught for 33 years, and taught physically handicapped students. They were mixed abilities as far as cognitive and levels. We had some very bright students that went into regular academic classes and only came to me for their physical needs, and then we had those that needed to be full-time in the classroom with a small group. They were behind academically.
Mm-hmm. I bet that was rewarding and challenging at the same time.
It was, but they were great kids, and very few behavior problems. They wanted to be in school, and they enjoyed it.
During that time, when did you get married? Was it prior to that?
Well, before I met Bob here in the village, I was married to my husband, Bud. We met at church in 1976. The church I was going to in Ocala, my Bud was pastor of the Christian church in Orange Lake at that time, and he was friends with my pastor and would come. His service ended sooner, and so he would come and sit in with ours, and then they would go out to dinner. That's where I met him. We were married for 27 years until he died in 2003. So. And then, of course, I was a widow for 15 years.
Oh, my goodness.
And it wasn't until I came here, not looking or expecting to ever fall in love and get married again, but it happened, and I found Bob, and he found me, I guess.
It was a big search living right across the street from one another, wasn't it?
Yeah, I used to joke with friends that asked me if I was would ever get married again, and I said, well, the Lord's going to have to plunk him right down in front of me. And he did.
And what brought you to the village?
Well, after I'm going to back up a little bit. After Bud died in 2003, about 3 years later, I had cancer. Oh. And it was stage 3 at the time. I didn't know if I was going to live or not, but I went through treatment at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa. And obviously I lived.
It looks like you're living well.
I forgot what I was going to say there, but anyway, I retired. Decided I was going to retire. My older brother, had died of cancer, never got to retire. He died 4 months after his diagnosis. So I retired, and after I went through treatment, it took about a year, I started traveling. Well, actually, I traveled after Bud died. My sister-in-law invited me that summer. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I had already volunteered for a women's build with the Habitat for Humanity. But that summer I was looking into volunteering at a national park somewhere because of my love of nature. Mm-hmm. And as I was researching that, my sister-in-law, who had been married to my older brother had died, invited me to go with her in their RV. They used to travel together for the summer, so I did, and I really enjoyed it. We went out to up to South Dakota and out to Wyoming and back, and I came home and bought myself a little RV. And so I was traveling already in the summertime when I was off from school. But after cancer, I started traveling almost full-time. I still had the house in Ocala, so I came back for winters primarily. And I did that until 2011, and it was getting hard to maintain the house while I was away so much. I had a pool that had to be hire somebody in the yard, and I came back one year, and the pool man had taken my money all summer, but the pool was black.
Oh, yeah.
So I decided to sell the house and travel full time, and I did that until I came here. But the reason I knew to come here, when my husband was pastor of the McIntosh Christian Church for 10 years, and we had a friend that attended there and moved up here. And so the ladies from the church would come up and visit her. So I came at least twice and had a tour and saw how wonderful it was, and was thinking in the back of my mind that someday when I couldn't travel anymore, this would be the place to come, like when I'm 85 or something. That was in my mind. But in 2017, my route, I was heading up north, and the route I decided to take was I went over to Cedar Key and up that way, and I knew my route was going to take me through here. Because in the past, in my travels, my first day goal was to get out of Florida. So I had never really done much in this area except drive through it to get to Georgia.
Get out of Florida.
Yeah, right. So I decided I was going to be coming through here, so I would stop and spend the night and take another tour just to find out the details of it. And so I did, and it was a wonderful tour, and I spent a couple days, I think. But I was still thinking that, this will be nice.
When the time
When
comes.
the time comes, yeah. But it happened that a mobile home in Park of the Pines had just come up for sale, and maybe it was Karen that mentioned it to me. And so while I was walking the dog, I walked by it and picked up the brochure. It was Tom's house, actually, now, but it was perfect for my needs. It was small. I didn't need, it was a lot bigger than my RV. And I still was thinking, I had a friend that was looking for a place in Florida that was an RVer also. And so I wrote a blog about it. I kept a blog of all my travels, and I took pictures all over the village and wrote a blog about it and suggested to my friend Donna that she might want to look into it because it sounded like what she would like. But before I left, I decided, well, this is a safe place. I could leave it as I travel and come back and spend my winters here. I had just finished a year out west in 2016. I'd been out there the whole year, and I was beginning to think it would have a nice place to come back to after a long trip. So I talked to the owner and had a tour of his house and said, okay. The price was right. And so I ended up staying a month, I think, because they didn't want to leave because they had doctor's appointments coming up. So I said, well, I'll wait. And so I got to know other people in the village while I was staying in the RV park, and that's how I ended up here.
And we referred to Bob, but tell our viewers who Bob is.
Bob Reynolds was my neighbor across the street, and the owner of the house introduced me to him, so I met him that way, and he was very friendly. One thing I noticed was everybody was very friendly. That was the biggest surprise for me, that everybody waved, and many people stopped. I like to walk, and that wasn't one of the attractions here, that you could walk everywhere. And so I'd be walking up to the store or to church, and people would stop and with their car or their golf cart and ask if I wanted a ride, and oh no, I like to walk. They did it so often, and Bob was one of them, that I said, well, maybe I'm robbing somebody of a blessing by not accepting. So I started to accept the rides from time to time, and so I got to know Bob a little bit, and he came over and helped me hook up the irrigation system before I left, and I told him he was in charge of that while I was gone. So I found him funny. We laughed a lot, and also what impressed me most as I got to know him better and watched him, he made everybody smile or laugh that he encountered. He would stop and see somebody walking with their head down with a walker, and he would stop and talk to them until they engaged their interest and made them smile. And he did that with the workers and just everybody. And that was a good quality for him. So that was his ministry in the village, I think.
And then wedding bells rang, and you got married here at the village, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
We've been married three years, a little more than 3 years.
Liz, I know you have a number of hobbies and interests. Would you share a little bit of those with?
Sure.
You talked about being out in nature.
Yes, that's one of the reasons I love it here so much, because of the hiking trails. I love to hike and did a lot of it in my travels, and kayak. Got the river. Recently, I've taken up bicycling again. I used to do it in college, but not too much since then. Horseback riding, I developed an interest in that. When I was out west, I had scheduled a mule ride to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. So I started in my year's travel by doing a horseback ride once a month in some beautiful places like Canyon de Chelly and a lot of the Indian sites and things with an Indian guide. And when I scheduled it, usually there was nobody else. It was just me and the guide. It was great.
Wow.
So I got a lot of horseback riding in there. And we also found out that there's a place to horseback ride near here. And so we did that a few times. Judy Hatch and I. She was also interested in that. But the last time I did it, I had some real pain in my hip, so that one might be over. Photography is a hobby, and I kept track of all my travels with an online blog. I like to read. I used to read a lot more than I do now, but I like history. I would stop at historical places, and of course my most recent interest is gardening and butterfly and bird habitat.
Well, I understand you just received a wonderful designation for your garden, your butterfly garden, and we're going to have an opportunity to see more of that at the end of this program. But Liz, thank you so much for sharing that with us and that designation, and I know it'll be interesting to many others to actually see in person as well as on the camera today. And just so people will know, you live in Park of the Pines. And thank you so much for sitting down with me. And one last question, what's still on your bucket list?
Well, I've done a lot of my bucket list that I had when I was traveling. The Grand Canyon mule trip was one, but and I crossed some things off, like through hiking the Appalachian Trail. But really, the only thing that I could think of that's still on my list is to serve the Lord and to serve others here in the community and elsewhere whenever I can in my small way. And
that's a wonderful thing to always have on our bucket list, isn't it? Well, Liz, thank you so much, and thank you for tuning in, but don't turn off the TV now, because we're gonna tour Liz's garden. Thanks so much.
I must start by giving credit to my neighbors Don and Pat Sinclair, who inspired me to start my own garden after admiring their amazing butterfly and bird habitat that surrounds their house. They have been the source of advice, help, plant donations, and friendship throughout my endeavors. My own habitat started with this small garden that surrounded the big rock. At first, the garden was mostly for attracting monarch butterflies and endangered species. I joined monarchwatch.org to learn how to establish a monarch way station to support monarch butterflies as they migrate through North America. This is an adult female monarch distinguished by the absence of 2 black dots visible on the males. Milkweed is the host plant for monarch and also queen butterflies. It is where they lay their eggs and is the only source of food for the caterpillars. Its flowers are also nectar, a food source for multiple butterflies and other pollinators. It's important to plant a variety of nectar food plants for adult butterflies of all kinds. Monarchs lay tiny white eggs on milkweed leaves. This tiny monarch caterpillar has just hatched and will eat the egg first. It then begins to eat the leaf around it and by the next day measures a ½ centimeter. It will eat voraciously until it reaches about 3 inches long. Then it will begin to look for a place to make its chrysalis. They can travel quite a distance to do this. In nature, not many survive to adulthood due to predators and other factors. This one made its chrysalis on the edge of my bird bath, and it is about to emerge as an adult. Because they are endangered, I now rescue monarch caterpillars and place them in enclosures with potted milkweed to give them a better chance for survival. One large enclosure can support up to 40 caterpillars. The largest number I have successfully raised was 38, but usually it's about 20 to 30 at a time. The monarchs migrate through here twice, early spring and late summer or fall. These monarchs are ready to be released. I keep track of the numbers and sex of the butterflies as they are released. Before long, many species of butterflies began to visit the garden. Many I had never seen before. I ordered a book about butterflies of Florida so I could learn how to identify them. And as I did, I learned that each kind has its own host plant where it lays eggs. So I began to plant host plants to attract more of them. The zebra longwing is Florida's state butterfly. Its host plant is various passion vines. This one is laying eggs on a corky stem vine. The resulting caterpillar is white with black and orange spots. The chrysalis looks like a dried leaf. The black swallowtail butterfly uses fennel, parsley, and dill as host plants. This picture shows a black swallowtail caterpillar, a chrysalis, and a newly emerged adult butterfly. Here are some other butterflies that grace my garden. This is a little sulfur butterfly. This is a painted lady butterfly. This is a mallow scrub hair streak, one of many kinds of hair streaks. The Gulf fritillary shares the passion vines with the zebra longwing as host plant. Their chrysalises are similar too. This is a common buckeye. A red-spotted purple butterfly. The long-tailed skipper lays its eggs on the blue pea vine. Many other types of skippers visit the garden too. This is an eastern tiger swallowtail. These are giant swallowtails, the largest butterflies that visit my garden. In addition to butterflies, the garden gets visits from an assortment of moths as well as bees. Bees are important pollinators in the garden. Notice the pollen stuck on this green bee's legs and body. There are also predators that show up, like this assassin bug. They will kill the butterfly larvae, so I handpick them and move them to the container garden in the backyard where they will eat the worms that attack my vegetable plants. I never use pesticides. It's not all about butterflies. I enjoy watching a variety of year-round and migratory birds that visit my feeders and bird bath. Cardinals and Carolina wrens are permanent residents. Bluebirds visit and bring their babies to the feeder, which is supplied with mealworms. I also have bluebird and wren houses in the backyard. We have some colorful migrants, like this summer tanager. This northern parula likes the tiny bird bath on the pole. Robins visit the large bird bath in the garden. Other frequent visitors include the Carolina chickadee, finches, and sparrows. Ruby-throated hummingbirds visit the feeder, but they especially like the natural nectar from the flowers. My garden and yard is now recognized by both the National Wildlife Federation and the Florida Wildlife Federation, designating it as a certified wildlife habitat. And that's all from the rock.